On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched the deadliest attacks in Israel's history, igniting a conflict that has been devastating for the Palestinians. Prior to these events, the region buzzed with the possibility of Israeli-Saudi normalization, and the Palestinian cause was gradually fading into the background of international affairs. Normalization is now off the table, perhaps indefinitely, and the region's focus has shifted back to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Hamas had multiple objectives in initiating the October 7th attacks. Beyond disrupting normalization efforts, its leaders aimed to draw Israel into a costly and prolonged guerrilla war, a proverbial Vietnam scenario. However, this ambition has eluded the Palestinian resistance group, and militarily, Hamas has suffered a crushing blow. Israel has decimated Hamas's military wing, the Izz al-Din al-Qassam brigades, which, built with Iranian sponsorship, consisted of 5 brigades organized into 24 battalions. The Isreali Defence Forces have reportedly dismantled 22 of these battalions, whilst limiting its own casualties. According to Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, Hamas is no longer an organized military force in the Gaza Strip. This raises a critical question. Why has Hamas failed to turn this war into Israel's Vietnam? To understand why Hamas has been unable to create the conditions for a successful guerrilla war against Israel, it's essential to delve into the principles of guerrilla warfare itself. Mao Zedong, one of the most influential guerrilla commanders, outlined these principles in his work on guerrilla warfare. His strategies enabled a smaller, less equipped peasant army to overcome the well-funded US-backed nationalists in the Chinese Civil War, establishing the Chinese Communist Party's rule. His work went on to inspire revolutionary leaders worldwide, including Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, and Ho Chi Minh, who adapted Mao's tactics to mobilize local populations and challenge powerful adversaries. Among the critical determinants Mao listed for a successful guerrilla war were popular support, the appeal of the movement's goals, and most importantly, sanctuary. Guerrilla fighters must be masters of mobility and evasion, engaging the enemy only when victory is heavily in their favor, and withdrawing if the battle turns against them. Mao famously stated that guerrilla fighters must be experts at running away, avoiding static positions, and keeping the situation fluid. This hit-and-run approach requires secure sanctuaries, where fighters can regroup, resupply, and plan future operations. Sanctuaries can be found in challenging terrains like jungles or mountains, or within the borders of sympathetic neighboring countries. Indeed, sanctuary has been the common thread in every successful guerrilla warfare campaign. The Vietnam War offers a quintessential example of the importance of securing sanctuary in guerrilla warfare. Hidden within Vietnam's dense jungle and rugged mountains, the Vietcong were able to launch devastating surprise attacks and then disappear into the landscape, avoiding direct confrontation with the better-armed US troops. Additionally, hidden within the jungles was an extensive network of tunnels that provided manufacturing hubs, resupply points, and most importantly, a place to hide from the enemy after ambushing them. Complementing the terrain and the tunnel network was the Ho Chi Minh Trail, an elaborate supply route through Laos and Cambodia, which was vital for transporting troops and supplies to the Viet Cong. The jungles of Vietnam, the Viet Cong's extensive tunnel networks, and the Ho Chi Minh Trail made it clear to the US that eliminating Viet Cong sanctuaries would be nearly impossible. Henry Kissinger summed up the essence of guerrilla warfare in 1969. The guerrilla wins if he does not lose. The conventional army loses if it does not win. Guerrilla warfare isn't about decisive battles, but about wearing down a stronger opponent over time. Unable to dismantle these sanctuaries or force a decisive battle, the US eventually withdrew. Similarly, the Taliban, armed with AK-47s, successfully resisted the might of the US Army for 20 years until the US eventually withdrew, allowing the Taliban to regain control of Afghanistan. Like the Viet Cong, the Taliban evaded US forces by seeking sanctuary in Afghanistan's mountainous terrain and through Pakistan's notoriously porous border, which facilitated the transshipment of men and material. After ambushes, They would disappear into the mountains while arms, intelligence, supplies, and recuperated wounded fighters flowed in from Pakistan. Unable to compel Pakistan to deny sanctuary and resources to the Taliban, the US ultimately withdrew. Sanctuary is the lifeblood of a guerrilla movement. It allows fighters to persist, regroup, and continue their struggle against a more powerful foe. And this is where Hamas struggles. Unlike the Vietcong or the Taliban, Hamas lacks the kind of sanctuary, whether in challenging terrain or supportive neighboring countries, that is crucial for sustaining a prolonged guerrilla campaign against Israel. Anti-guerrilla operations must focus on locating base areas, isolating enemy combatants from sanctuary and resources, and then eradicating them, exactly what the IDF have managed to do. The Gaza Strip occupies an area smaller than New York City. This confined space allows Israel to utilize its surveillance satellites, aircraft, and UAVs to monitor virtually everything that happens. Anything within rifle or RPG range of Israel's slow, methodical, and organized advance can be meticulously observed from above and communicated to troops on the ground. Every hideout and tunnel is identified and either targeted with airstrikes or cleared through ground combat before being destroyed, preventing their reuse. Hamas lacks terrain into which it can escape and hide. It is essentially boxed in by the Mediterranean Sea on one side, Israel on two others, and Egypt on the fourth. A key source of sanctuary and safe haven for Hamas was the Philadelphia corridor. This narrow strip, only 100 meters wide in some places, runs the 14-kilometer length of Gaza's border with Egypt and includes the Rafah crossing, which was Gaza's only outlet to the outside world not controlled by Israel. Despite numerous anti-tunnel efforts on both sides of the Egypt-Gaza border, including flooding on the Egyptian side and Israeli airstrikes, cross-border smuggling via underground routes has persisted, exploited by Hamas to bring in weapons. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the corridor as oxygen for Hamas, whilst the IDF claim Hamas used a vast network of tunnels beneath this border to import arms, allowing it to build up the military machine it deployed on October 7th. The corridor was seized by Israel in May this year as its Gaza ground offensive pushed into Rafah. IDF officials have claimed that about 80% of the more than 150 Hamas tunnels beneath the corridor were neutralized, another major blow if true. Netanyahu has stated that Israel must maintain control over the Philadelphia corridor. If successful in gaining this concession, Israel will be able to easily prevent Hamas from replenishing its weapons arsenal. Another key factor distinguishing this conflict from US engagements in Vietnam and Afghanistan is the high level of public support in Israel for the war on Gaza. In both Vietnam and Afghanistan, declining public support and growing voter dissatisfaction contributed to the US decision to withdraw. These wars were distant and did not pose an existential threat to the American population. In contrast, the October 7th attack served as a sobering reminder to Israelis that they are surrounded on all fronts by enemies. This assault, the deadliest in Israel's history, shook the nation even more profoundly than the Yom Kippur War of 1973, when Egypt and Syria launched surprise invasions. Unlike those incursions which aimed to capture territory, the October 7th attacks involved the intentional targeting of civilians. This has intensified public resolve, and support for the war is strong. Without the issue of hostages, it would likely be overwhelming. A recent Pew Research Center survey shows that 39% of Israelis feel Israel's military response against Hamas in Gaza has been about right, while 34% believe it has not gone far enough. Whoever leads the Israeli government, be it Netanyahu, Gallant, or Gantz, will have solid public backing for continued and sustained military action in Gaza. While Hamas has succeeded in bringing the Palestinian issue back into international focus, it has failed to create the conditions necessary for a sustained guerrilla war against Israel. Lacking sanctuary, whether in challenging terrain or supportive neighboring states, Hamas is confined within Gaza's borders. Israel's control over the Philadelphia corridor has severed Hamas's critical supply lines, limiting its ability to resupply and regroup. Militarily weakened, Hamas faces a difficult path forward. For Israel, the key to controlling Gaza lies with Egypt. If an Islamist government in Egypt were to turn a blind eye to smuggling through the Philadelphia corridor or offer sanctuary to Palestinian resistance groups in the Sinai, it could make Gaza a strategic threat once again. For now, however, Israel's control over Gaza's borders remains a formidable obstacle to Hamas's ambitions. I've been your host, Albert. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. Until next time.